So there's three. There's three challenges to sovereignty. We've done the first one, regional groups. The second one, contested and changing borders. So borders can be challenged internally from within the state and externally from groups outside of the state. Internally, you might have a group that seeks independence. They want to separate, they want to secede. The West Papuans want to secede from Indonesia. Palestinians want to secede from Israel. The Kurds want to secede from Turkey. So these are internal challenges within the state. We don't have any in Australia. There are no groups, no people in a certain territory who want to secede. Even the Indigenous people don't claim to want their own state. I think they've realised that ship has long sailed. It can also be challenged externally from outside of the state. And that's when you have war, interstate war. So when states, other global actors infringe on the territory of another state. An example is the South China Sea. Another example, the Iraq War. So the coalition of the willing, Australia, the US, UK, we were an external threat to Iraq's sovereignty. We invaded, we occupied the state. You could say the Japanese attack on Darwin was an external threat to our sovereignty. They were challenging our borders. So the external one is almost always interstate conflict. Why are these challenges? Because the borders or territory of the state are being challenged. So you lose power and authority. When we controlled Iraq, Iraqis didn't have power and authority, we did. When war happens, usually there's occupation. If you're occupying a foreign state, that foreign state no longer has power and authority. So it's probably the most simplistic one, that when borders are challenged, territory is challenged, someone is going to lose some power and authority. Internal. This is Indonesia, broken up into nations, just like we had Australia broken up into nations last lesson. And this in the green is West Papua, actually. No, I just realised that's not right. That's West Papua. Someone has highlighted this differently. This is West Papua. These people want to secede, they want to separate. They're internally, within the state, they're challenging the state. And it's pretty obvious. If they were given independence, Indonesia would lose power and authority over this whole region. It's a threat, a challenge to Indonesia's sovereignty. It's incredibly well. Yeah, when we do TNCs, we'll look at Rio Tinto, which has all these mines in this region. And it's got some of the it's got the richest gold mine in the world and some of the richest copper mines in the world. Incredibly wealthy region, but deep in the mountains. So yes, it's a wealthy region. I mean, the people are poor, they're dirt poor, but we go in there and we take out all the resources, we ship them to Australia. A short video about the West Papuans challenging
West Papua has 3 million people and great natural resources, but many here dream of independence from Indonesia, something the authorities in Jakarta have resisted for 50 years. Outside journalists are rarely given visas. These pictures were taken secretly by Australia's ABC network. It follows the death in June of Marco Tambuni, leader of the main peaceful separatist movement, the KNBP. Those who were with him say he was shot by police.
He was shot in the leg. He was shot but still tried to escape. Then they shot him in the torso.
The death of Marco Tambuni provoked riots. The Indonesian authorities say he was armed and had a record of violence, a claim denied by his lawyer.
Those responsible for crimes against activists, those responsible for Marco's death, have to be investigated and dealt with in accordance with the law.
The separatists accused the government of using an elite anti-terrorist force set up by Britain, the United States and Australia against them. Victor Yemo is the new face of the independence movement. Speaking at a safe house, he says the authorities won't stop until their campaign is crushed.
They want to kill us in West Papua. You can go around here and you can see, every day you can see military. We know that Indonesia wants us to be lost from this land. We know it.
Amnesty International believes around 100,000 Papuans have died in this conflict since the 1960s. But the Indonesian government says it acts within the law and has a right to exert control over its own sovereign territory. West Papua has parallels with East Timor. Both have struggled against Indonesian control. East Timor won its freedom. Divided and dangerous West Papua is almost forgotten. Duncan Kennedy, BBC News, in Sydney.
So this became an issue about 2 months ago again, when West Papuans jumped over the fence at the Australian Embassy in Jakarta, and they were seeking asylum, and Tony Abbott was meeting with the Indonesian president. What do you think Tony Abbott said to the media when he left that meeting? So the media said, how do you feel about the issue in West Papua? Almost word for word, that's what he said. He said, we have respect for Indonesia's sovereignty. We respect their right to make decisions about their own territory. Yes. Now, at some point, you have to have some moral authority, I think, as well. And if you see something bad happening, say so. But in this case, they're one of our closest neighbours. They've got 250 million people. They're incredibly important for trade. He doesn't want to aggravate one of our closest neighbours. And this is an internal conflict in Indonesia. I'll move on to the next one. External. So borders can be challenged externally. And this is the South China Sea. And there's been a dispute for about a decade now. And pretty much it's all China's fault. China is getting more and more powerful. It wants to be seen as more powerful. So the way it's doing that is spreading its huge navy around Asia. And so it's decided it wants to claim everything inside this red line as a part of China. Now that would be fine if other states, this wasn't taking territory away from all these other states. So this territory here is Indonesia's, this territory is Malaysia's, Brunei's, the Philippines have a very large chunk, and Vietnam. So what we have is an external threat to territory and borders.
So they don't want to take any land and come to the sea.
Well, there are islands inside that land, but it's the resources.
How can they be
Oil
very
wells,
mindful
gas wells, fisheries, all of those resources are dollars and cents.
of that? Yeah, how do they think they're entitled to that? Like, how do they just say, like,
What they've done is, they've grabbed some of these smaller islands, and so once they've grabbed the island, they then put the 250-kilometre circle around that island. And then down here they grab another one, they put a 250-kilometre circle around it. But in the world of global affairs, if you have the military, that's the ballgame. And they've got the second biggest navy in the world after the US. And this is on their doorstep. There was a question. So this is an example of sovereignty of these states being challenged externally by China. And there is, it's an ongoing, dispute. They haven't settled it. There have been no direct military confrontations, but the Chinese Navy is basically sailing up and down that whole region. It seems like basically China's going to win the battle because they've already started setting up new cities, because they just create new cities, and their Navy has control. Now it gets tricky because the US is moving back into the region as well.
Look, that cuts out all of Brunei's sea.
Yeah. It's Brunei. Come on.
But that's just sad. Imagine if you had
That's right. You're right. It's a threat to their sovereignty. It challenges the ordered world of international affairs. Alright. A short video.
pleasure to have you with us. We got some reaction from China's foreign ministry spokesperson saying that China firmly...
So, I'll pause this. The guy on the right you're going to get to know, you'll be referencing him in most of your essays. He's close to the most respected foreign minister in the world. He's the Indonesian foreign minister, and he's just brilliant. We're going to listen to him a fair bit throughout the year, but he's brilliant. He's such a good diplomat, and he puts our diplomats to shame. Anyway, I'll let him.
Opposes any country having nothing to do with the South China Sea issue getting involved in this dispute. What do you think of China's reaction to this possible joint ASEAN-US statement in terms of dispute in that area?
Not surprising, I think, to put it that way. We have been aware of China's position on this matter, but at the same time, the fact of life is that the issues on the South China Sea needs resolution in one way or the other. Probably there is some discussion about whether this be done bilaterally or in another setting. But Indonesia, through ASEAN, is keen to ensure we have conditions conducive for talks, for negotiations to take place, so that the various overlapping claims on the South China Sea can be resolved by peaceful means.
Minister Natalegawa, we have a dispute taking place between China and Japan over the capture of this fishing boat captain in disputed waters between Japan and China. What does this development and this dispute raise in terms of concerns for ASEAN countries and in their own territorial dispute with China?
Well, it reminds all of us that we cannot take for granted the relatively benign atmosphere we've had for many decades now in the Asia-Pacific region that has enabled our countries, all our countries, to develop economically and to pursue prosperity. In other words, we must ensure that we continue to invest in various ways and means to allow for peaceful solutions of problems. And now we are having this latest episode between China and Japan. We hope the two countries can find ways and means to solve the matter amicably. Of course, countries in ASEAN, including Indonesia, would be keen to ensure, again, we have that conditions conducive for such a peaceful resolution. We have no interest whatsoever to see our region being troubled or being destabilized by episodes of this type.
So he's making it clear he doesn't want it to turn into a military conflict. It's all about peaceful resolution, peaceful resolution, peaceful resolution, which is going to be hard when you have a state as large as China being the bully in the region. Okay. No. Because, well, he's good at what he does. He's helped shape Indonesia into a peaceful force in the region rather than an aggressive force. So Indonesia spends very little on their military. They haven't invaded any other states in the last 30 or 40 years, whereas I think our average is like one a year.
Our average?
Yeah, it's pretty good. We send our troops everywhere. Our troops are all over the world. And he's also had this strong emphasis on peace in the region. So he could very easily have changed his rhetoric then and been anti-China, China is a bully. Instead, it was always about respect. When he goes in the media, it's not about inflaming situations. You can't say the same for other diplomats. They get on the media, they open their trap and cause trouble. All right, I want us to do one question on internal and external challenges, and I might walk you through how to organise that answer, because it's going to be a longer question, and I might do that in Word.